On July 4th of 1977, we had all planned to make a big statement by going down to Chinatown, because that's when the Waching was supposed to go and collect the final payoff from the dealers. The Joe Boys and the Waching both were in Chinatown. It was a little after 8 p.m. and they faced each other right in front of the projects, and there was a shootout. We had 2 members who were shot, one who was killed, I call Tiger. On the other side, there was a boy who was shot as well. And we were all very upset because he was very young. We had different factions of the Joe Boys, and he was a favorite of most of us. Everybody was just talking about they knew something was going to happen, something really bad. And it was just a matter of time. The police knew it, the gang members knew it, the average citizen, storekeeper, the most prestigious, the elders in Chinatown, people just sensed it. Some would not go out at night. Some people actually just were afraid to go out at all, no matter what time of day it was. It was the Sunday of Labor Day in 1977 where the members of the Joe Boys went to the Golden Dragon restaurant for their revenge.
In San Francisco's Chinatown, things have been tense all summer long. Now the situation is about to boil over at local landmark, the Golden Dragon restaurant. Inside, the members of 2 rival gangs, the Waching and the Hop Sing, are having a late meal at opposite ends of the restaurant when members of a 3rd gang, the Joe Boys, show up to get even for the Waching's killing.
The shooting began at close to 2 a.m. The Golden Dragon was one of the few restaurants that was still operated at that hour. There was approximately 75 patrons there, a group of high schoolers, not gang affiliated. And then there was actually a Caucasian couple. They were actually regulars. The leader of the Wachings, which was Michael Louis, and the leader of the Hop Sing Boys was Frankie Yi. They were both at separate tables. Each table had their gang members. Tim, the leader of our group, sent 2 cars to the Golden Dragon. They knew that in all likelihood, the Wachings and the Hop Sings would be there because that was actually their regulars. The 2 cars pulled up in front of the restaurant. They got out, 3 gunmen, and as they were entering, one of the gunmen stopped for a second just to look in. Right when he looked in, one of the gang members was looking out and saw someone looking in with a rifle. And so in Cantonese, he screamed, "Gun!" They immediately hit the ground and knew to take cover. The 3 gunmen went in and started blasting away. The first gunman was armed with a .45 caliber semi-automatic rifle. The second gunman was armed with a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. And the third gunman was armed with a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun as well as a revolver.
For current restaurant manager Tony Ng, the Golden Dragon shooting was a very personal affair, as his father and uncle were working near the front counter on that fateful night.
When my dad was here, he was the cashier and manager. My uncle just immigrated from Hong Kong and was also the maitre d'. He also happened to be a reservist policeman in Hong Kong, and I guess training pays off because he saw the gunman come in. He screamed for everybody to duck. He also covered himself and pushed my dad down in the cash register area, and they hid. From what he told me, he was only about 3 feet away from one of the guys shooting.
The flames were shooting out of the end of the gun, and this is all within seconds, and my husband says, "Get under the table." And I guess I must have moved just at the right time, and the lady in back of me was shot in the mouth.
They just blasted away, and it was nonstop for about a minute. After the gun stopped, they turned and ran out.
The day after the massacre was memorable because everyone acted like nothing had happened.
The next day after the shooting, basically nobody even knew about it. The news didn't come out yet, and life was normal. Nobody had any fear. Fear did not set in their minds at that point. They just cleaned up everything. All the blood was cleaned off, everything cleaned off. Nothing happened. It was packed the next day.
It's the kind of thing nobody really expects to happen. That's why I imagined that business was the same as usual yesterday. It's just something that's simply so unbelievable.
But the strange calm did not last for long, and as word got out, Chinatown became a ghost town.
The following day, Chinatown just completely collapsed. There was so much fear in the air that nobody walked the streets.
Chinatown became a ghost community. Businesses, revenue, taxes was all impacted. Tourists just stayed away. I mean, this actually took years before there was a recovery.
Gang members who had been operating largely unchallenged in the shadows for years now found themselves thrust into the national spotlight as a result of the carnage at the Golden Dragon.
Immediately, there was a $25,000 reward that was announced. And actually within a short period of that, another week or two later, it went up to $100,000, which was the highest it's ever been and allowed by law.
And the prevailing culture of the streets of Chinatown did not look favorably on people who talked to the police.
Hopefully, these tragic murders will so inflame the Chinese community that they will start standing up, being counted, and cooperate with the police, and have the guts to create an intolerance for gangsterism and extortions within Chinatown.
It was very frustrating for the police, mainly because they could not get testimony from the citizens, either the business people who were being extorted, the folks running the gambling parlors, and even victims, just citizens who were innocent bystanders who were affected and all. People were just terrorized of testifying.
In San Francisco's Chinatown, the police have finally realized that much of the violence may have been avoided or stopped if there had been a better understanding of and focus upon the community they were trying to protect.
The gang war had been going on for quite a number of years. It was almost like feeding itself. You'd have people killed, you have gang leaders who were murdered, people would step up and take their place. You'd have the gambling, the extortions, and everything else, going on, and that just kind of continued and continued. And then you had something major like that happen where it caught the attention of the top city officials, and it really shook up the police department. And so I think in many ways, it was all a means to an end. I think that if there was more outreach, recruiting in the community to recruit more Chinese officers, that could have made a difference, because then you would have had more open communication between the community and the police, as well as more intervention.
Not only did the police add more Chinese-speaking officers, they took a definitive step and officially confronted the gang problem.
The police said, we have to do more. So what they did was they formed the gang task force. Again, this was in 1977. And even to this day, the gang task force is still an active division of the San Francisco police. And in fact, the first gang task force was specifically to target Chinatown and the Chinese gangs. Eventually, it's branched out to all the gangs throughout the city.
And with the tools and the manpower at the disposal of the gang task force, they were able to take a big bite out of the gang problem in Chinatown.
One person in particular deserves a lot of credit. It was an officer named Dan Foley. He was one of the first members of the gang task force. He was actually attributed to basically cracking the Golden Dragon case because he ended up befriending one of the gunmen and was able to get the gunman to turn himself in and also to testify against the other gang members and basically cracked the case right open. Not only that, but basically cracked the whole gang open and basically really just tore apart the whole hierarchy. And because of the fact that the Golden Dragon case was blown wide open, it really was an end to the Doughboys.
The gangs of Chinatown have been largely subdued, but across the United States and around the world, there are cities and areas famous for both high tourism and high crime rates. So, what should you do to keep yourself safe in an unfamiliar city?
What you need to remember, if you're not familiar with an area of town or something like that, look at your surroundings. If a bunch of people come in at once and they look like they're looking for trouble, that could be a hint for you to kind of take cover. If you, on your travels into the restaurant, see graffiti and things like that around, that's also a telltale sign that the gang members are in the area. It's important to know your surroundings, know your escape routes, know your abilities if you are carrying a weapon, and know the laws of that state should you be coming in from out of state.
I think it's important for people to know trust is something that is it's a great virtue to have, and to be careful and just to be aware of who you can trust and who you can't trust.
And what if, God forbid, you find yourself in a scenario like Golden Dragon?
Like in the Golden Dragon shooting in restaurants or places like a coffee shop, the number one thing is to find out, how am I going to get out of this place? Every building I go into, every setting I go into, and I notice the exits. And when I teach safety in buildings and teach safety, I always say to the audience, how many exits did you see when you came in? How many places can you get out? Nobody can answer the question. You always want to find out, how am I going to get out of a bad situation? I know we're not allowed behind the kitchen, but if a shooting starts, you know they have an exit. They probably have a door in the back that you can get out. It's a good place to hide. If I went that direction, I would probably find some type of weapon to protect myself. Guns are not the only protection. There are so many other things you can use. I don't think hiding behind a table, I think you make yourself a target. Maybe on the short run, you hide, but then you got to think. You can't just stay there. You have to think, how am I going to get out of this situation? I might have a good hiding place right now. I may not have a good hiding place in 30 seconds. So what do? I need to be scanning the area, looking around, or do I have an opportunity to fight? If I have an opportunity to disarm the bad guy, I don't have to know martial arts. I just have to get the gun away from him. If that's what it takes for me to run up and grab him because he turned his back, then that's what I got to do.
In the aftermath of the Golden Dragon Massacre, the gang activity was severely curbed in Chinatown, ultimately resulting in new hope and a new direction for the community.
The whole Chinatown climate is a lot better now. It's not the same Chinatown. Nobody really bothers you in Chinatown anymore. The gangs don't really bother you. Yeah, I mean, there's that once in 1,000 chance where somebody in the neighborhood gets mugged. That can happen anywhere. That's as bad as it gets.
The Golden Dragon Massacre shook the city of San Francisco to its core and changed the city forever, leading to the formation of San Francisco's first gang task force. And its formation helped stem the tide of the San Francisco gangs and made the city a much safer place for everyone. San Francisco's action prompted other cities to start their own gang units. By looking to the past, we can gain the knowledge to make the future a better place for all.